Welcome to Talk to Brazil with Tom Reaoch, the business connector to business in Brazil.
Welcome to Talk to Brazil, the Business Connection, the world's first English language internet radio program about business in Brazil and the world, and now in podcast format. I'm Tom Reaoch, an American living in Brazil for many years and known for business networking, and talking from my podcast studio in Campinas, São Paulo, Brazil. Today's guest is Elaina Zuker, and she's talking with us from Westmount, Quebec in Canada. Elaina and I met several weeks ago through Elinor Stutz, also a previous guest on Talk to Brazil, and a mutual networking connection. Elaina Zuker is a seasoned businesswoman, author, consultant, and educator. President of Elaina Zuker Associates in Montreal, Canada, has taught seminars to hundreds of employees and managers at major corporations such as AT&T, IBM, American Express, MCI International, and is a frequent keynote speaker at conferences and industry events. Author of 6 books on leadership, management, and communication, her best-selling book, The 7 Secrets of Influence on McGraw-Hill, is the recent main selection for Business Week Book Club. It has been translated into 4 languages and is now also an e-book. Our latest book is A Swift Kick in the Cants, the new peer mentor model for success now, and is now part of a co-authored book on the subject in Portuguese. So with that, hello, Elaina, and welcome to Talk to Brazil Business Connection.
Hi, Tom. Bon dia. Is that how you say it?
That's how we say it.
That's how you say it. Well, I love the sound of Portuguese. It sounds very complicated, but I'd love to learn a few words. So good morning, Tom, and good morning, everybody. And I'm very excited about the opportunity to talk to everyone. So we're going to talk about influence, and it is interesting because influence has always been around. Many, many years ago, one of the most best-selling books was called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Right, my favorite.
Now, it was one of my favorites, but, you know, with all due respect, he got half of it right, because influencing is more than just winning friends. Sometimes you are. Sometimes you influence people, and they're not your friends. So influence is like a step further. It's of course it's creating that level of trust and rapport. That's a very important first step. But then you must create a change in the other person's behaviors or attitude. Mm-hmm. And I'll get into that a little bit when I'll share with you the definition as I consider it of influence. But, you know, you influenced me, Tom, because when we first talked, we said that we were going to do a kind of discussion about why people need to be resilient in these crazy times we're living in.
Right.
I know Brazil has had terrible challenges with COVID. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Montreal, where I live, has been a hot spot as well. And so, you know, at first we were going to talk about my journey from when I started my business career. But after I got to the 20th page, I thought no one is going to sit still for this.
Right.
So,
what caught my attention after we started our first interaction really was a post that you put on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, you are an influence expert, where you put up a chart from the World Economic Forum showing that the influence skills will be a growing need in 2022.
Yes.
So that's where the question comes. Our influence skills, I take it they're like good wine. They just keep getting better and more valuable over time. Is that it?
I love that analogy. And if you don't mind, I may use it.
Go ahead.
Yes. influence, what I like to say is that influence is really a set of skills, a set of behaviors that anyone can learn, practice, and master. The important aspects, and that's why I was so intrigued by that article, is what's very paradoxical is that technology has been really our friend in this time when everybody literally is working virtually, working from home.
Right.
But as an author whose name was John Nesbitt, and many years ago he wrote a book called Megatrends. And what he said then, which I think is even more true now, is that high tech leaps ahead and high touch lags behind.
Mm-hmm.
So what seems to be happening, especially younger people who are so addicted to their screens, that interpersonal skills, good old-fashioned communication skills, are getting rusty. We're getting worse at basic communication and getting worse at influence because we aren't out there meeting, greeting, talking to people in real time, looking into people's eyes. So this is why I say that influence is needed now more than ever, because there's certain jobs, as the World Forum predicts, that really are going to become obsolete or automated.
Right.
You know, artificial intelligence. In fact, little known fact, Montreal, where I live, is fast becoming the AI center of the world.
See?
Yeah, there's a little fact. So,
you see, you take that what you said about Montreal, and here where I live, Campinas, the trend is to talk more about smart cities, and a smart city englobes everything what you just said.
Exactly.
It has to be, you have to engage, and that's today. We need to engage in a multi-sensorial process. My business, our podcast, we are talking, we've communicated, and we've never seen each other.
Exactly.
You don't know that I have blue eyes. And
I do now.
I know because I said so. But that's back the essence of person-to-person, face-to-face contact, with I highly value, and you know that you do too.
Exactly.
But over the years, what I had to learn, and starting an internet radio program that reached the world, was most of the people that I know and I talked to and I've interviewed, Elinor's another person. I've never met Elinor personally. And so you see how we communicated, how Elinor presented me to you. And I don't know if you've ever seen Elinor.
No, I've never met Elinor.
But that's what the world is today. We don't necessarily need to be. And there's 8 billion people out there that we can relate to. And using what you're saying, but we do have to have the skill set to how to do that in a different way. It's not just an emoji anymore, right?
No. Let me talk about this a little bit. I've always been in sales, Tom. I started my life here in Montreal, and, crazy. They say you can't go home again, but here I am after a long career in New York City and Silicon Valley, Northern California. And, I'm back here now because you could literally be in a town like you're in and be anywhere. You don't need, once upon a time, I needed to be in New York City on Madison Avenue.
Right.
I needed to take the subway to go see people. Mm-hmm. But, I can see people like you right now over the phone.
Right.
But, and I know that you're an absolutely great networker. So let me talk a little bit about networking and how it has to do with influence. The phrase influencer is a very big deal right now on the internet. Mm-hmm. But, I had coined the phrase years ago, and it means something different in my mind. So for the listeners, I'd like to, first of all, be clear about the how I'm defining influence. I'm hope it's useful.
Mm-hmm.
So an influencer on the internet, it could be somebody like, a Kardashian, or somebody who has like 8 million Twitter followers.
Right.
It really has to do with numbers and the number of followers. And then sometimes these people get brands to pay them money because they have an audience, they have a following.
Right.
But what I'm talking about is you could have 0 connections on LinkedIn and still be good at influencing. So the definition that I like to use for influence is that influence is a power. So just like electricity or nuclear power, it can be used for good or ill. It's up to the user. How are you going to use it? Right? If you have a big megaphone, are you going to use it for propaganda or truth? Right? And it's the power to affect people's attitudes or behavior. Now, you won't see, how can I tell if someone's behavior has changed? Well, there's the evidence. It's right in front of me. They've made a decision. They bought a car.
Right.
They sold something. They took a job. But changing an attitude is a little more subtle, and you may not see the evidence until it comes out in behavior. Now, the other part is that it's seen in its effect, okay? So that I like to say the value of the communication is the results you get.
That's true. That's the value of everything, right?
We measure business by results, right?
Right.
So, but interestingly, Tom, an ancient archaic definition of influence in the dictionary says that influence is an ethereal fluid flowing from the stars, said to have magical powers over the fates of men, which is so crazy. But in a way, I like to say it's true. It's right in there in Webster's. But
well, I agree with you, but I would just change that for men and include women.
Exactly, of course. Well, that goes without saying. But what I like to say is that influence, when they say it's like magic, like good magic, it requires a lot of tiny steps and skills behind the scenes, so it comes out looking effortless.
Right.
So in that sense, we sometimes think some people are just born with it. And it's true. Some people are very charismatic and they are good at influencing people intuitively. But what I want to say is that you may be good at it, but it may not be intentional or strategic. And if you don't know what you're doing, then it's just an accident. And you may not be as effective as you could be if you were more conscious about the process. There's a Canadian pronunciation for you.
Yeah, but I agree with you. And I think the important word that you just put there is that it is a process. It's just not, it's not stop and go. It's a process.
Exactly.
And what you bring and you're showing is exactly what I believe. Influence, and when we're looking to the future, we're talking about the future, what's going to happen. Nobody knows. But when you were in your subway and going to Madison Avenue and meeting people, you absorbed trends. You saw what was happening. And at that time, that was part of the necessity of being somewhere. Because the start of trends and innovation was around you, but not necessarily people could put their finger on it. And that's part of the skill set of knowing what to use your influence on. Because there's so much out there. And I think when you point that in a direction, then it becomes beneficial.
Exactly. So how I created this influence program, if you'd like to know, I mean, as I say, I have 20 pages on how I created all this. But, it was very, very useful. I'm now going to use what I did, Tom, and I'll send it to you. What I did was I wrote all my major choice points and experiences in my career, and then I highlighted, so what did I learn?
Right.
And it might be very useful for every business person. It happens that this is, the beginning of the Jewish New Year. It's Rosh Hashanah today. And I thought, well, this is a good New Year exercise to do. What was a choice that you made? And either you fell on your face or you succeeded. What did you learn? Because everything is a lesson in life. So what I found was that I had to learn what my customer was all about. And of course, that's basic selling 101. And so what I tried to teach and how I created my influence program was that I was invited by some of the consultants, some of the people within AT&T, a little company in New Jersey that I literally stumbled into, to teach selling skills for non-selling people. Right. Because I had always been in sales, as I said. I sold Avon, I sold encyclopedias, I sold ad space. In fact, one of my friends said to me once, you know, Elaina, you've always been selling air. Meaning that, you know, selling ad space and encyclopedias, it's selling a concept. Right. It's conceptual selling, and it's like not like selling a vacuum cleaner or a table. Right. It's not a concrete thing. And so I learned, you know, that I had to understand what need I was fulfilling and what pain I was helping. Right. And so that was just like the basic of sales. And when I started working with AT&T many, many years later, I had already gotten a graduate degree in this field called organization development, which, tell you what, I didn't really need it, but I have it. Because, you know, it's really common sense. And so I was teaching the internal executives in the HR department and some of the IT people what we were calling consulting skills for non-selling people. Right. Like, they didn't understand that if I'm good at my profession, an engineer, let's say, within the company, that's not enough. Because many ideas gather dust if you can't influence someone to use it. Right. And so this was like a big aha for these people because they never thought of themselves as sales people. And so to soften it, I called it influence skills, like soft skills, according to the definition that I just gave. And a lot of people had a lot of resistance to the word influence because of, you know, I mean, even now we see in government influence peddling, and they sort of felt that the idea meant manipulation. Right, right. And the way that I like to help them understand it, if you will, is that I like to look at it in two dimensions. Do I, as the influencer, intend, so the first is, are my intentions honorable? Do I intend for you to get value? Am I adding benefit? Am I teaching you something so that you feel enhanced and enriched as a result of our exchange? And the other is, what is the effect? What's the effect over there for you? Right. Do you feel conned or, lessened, or do you feel like you've gotten something of benefit? And if I could answer both of those as yes, then I would say it's positive influence. So for the moral, you know, if you have like a moral problem with the word influence, I think that's a very good test for people, sort of mental test to put yourself through.
No, I've seen that, and I agree with you, because I've seen that in my interaction in face-to-face and virtually when you talk about networking. Networking is the same thing.
Exactly.
And I agree with what you said way up front. I don't believe that network is about making friends. And what I've always said that in business there are no friends. And in Brazil we have a concept, everybody thinks everybody's a friend. I have a very personal concept of what a friend is. And I'm not saying that a customer is cannot be friendly. but they're not friends. I don't
Well,
necessarily need to have that.
Absolutely.
But what I do is back to what you just said. If I am not offering something of value for a person, then why are we doing? Then we're not selling air. We're just talking about air when we're full of air. And so I think that's the difference of many people confuse that. And they think the relationship, the influence, that's because of a friendship. And it's really not. I think it's a process. Networking is a process. Influencing, leadership, they're all processes like you just mentioned. So
exactly.
And now, we have to separate that from our personal life to a professional life, because you apply what you just said at any number of companies. It doesn't have to be AT&T. It was AT&T, IBM, MCI, anywhere. It's a business process.
Exactly. And much as we don't like to, it really is a quid pro quo. It's like, in fact, when I reach out to people on LinkedIn, I'm sure you do the same. Or today, for example, this conversation, what is it doing for me and what is it doing for you? You're getting a guest to fill up your half hour. Hopefully, I have something interesting to contribute to your devoted audience. And I'm getting an opportunity to, spread my message about influence. So we're both getting something. Right. How I met, I'll just, I think we're coming to almost the end. Is that right? So I'll just mention how I even came to you in Brazil. Mm-hmm. So it's a crazy networking story. So I hardly ever go on Instagram. But I had a kind of catchy looking ad for the new book, A Swift Kick in the Cans, which is about peer mentoring, which we haven't even talked about. Mm-hmm. And so I posted like once on Instagram, and I don't have any followers because I really had never been on there. Right. And I get a response from a guy in São Paulo. Right. His name is Claudio Brito, and he has a company called Global Mentoring, and he was very interested in my approach to mentoring, which is peer mentoring. Mm-hmm. So we connected on LinkedIn. We had several conversations. Fast forward, he and I have collaborated on a book containing his work, his quite scholarly about mentoring, the traditional way, and my approach, which is a little different, peer mentoring. Right. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. So I mentioned this to Elinor Stutz, who I met. We reached out to each other on LinkedIn because we have so much in common. Mm-hmm. Women of a certain age, selling skills as a basis, so on and so on. And I said, yeah, I'm doing this book with this Brazilian guy. She said, gee, I know somebody in Brazil. He has a podcast. Right? So that's how it works. And so here I am this morning. We're not even talking about my interest in Brazil to start with, which was that collaboration book. But here we are waltzing off into other topics.
No, but you're catching on a thing that I think is vastly important. And what I always mention and I tell people, you need to worry about keywords. In Portuguese, it's called palavras-chave. And what word could be something that gives a click to somebody else? When you talk to Elinor, you just said Brazil, that clicked.
Right, but you need a certain kind of mind.
Like without a doubt.
Right,
But
Elinor has that kind of brain.
No, but a lot of people do. There are people out in the world that do, and most of the people that I know, and I'm selective because they do. If you don't have people that are have a common understanding, then really you're just talking to the wind.
Right, but you go through your mental remember Rolodex.
No, that's it. And I'm saying there's 8 billion people out there. I don't really plan to reach 8 billion. Right. But I'm just, and you, as you are, we're trying to reach people that are mentally, they create action. They're acted by keywords. You said
Exactly.
on LinkedIn, your strongest keyword on LinkedIn is influence, an influence
Right,
expert.
but it's fine. It's exactly. And, that's why I asked you to use the other bio, because what my paragraph is on LinkedIn is by no means everything that I do, but it's the most prominent,
No,
And I
agree, but I don't want to get away from that. That's all important. But today,
Exactly.
people are searching. The people out there in the whole world, they're searching in a very objective way. And
Yes,
that
of course.
could be locality, that could be on a certain interest, and I think that all lines up. That has to explode later. But I'm an inbound marketing person. I want people to find me.
Exactly.
Because I don't have time or money to go out and try to find 8 billion people. So they have to find me.
But I mean, LinkedIn is amazing. LinkedIn is just amazing, really amazing. But I wanted to just close on the idea of agility, because the main lesson and the 7th secret in my book and in my course is flexibility. And so we've been sort of dancing around that a bit, like roll with the punches. But the main lesson is what I say is attentiveness. That's pay attention to the other person, because influence happens one person at a time,
Right.
even if you're talking to multitudes. And flexibility, to be able to be flexible and adaptive and resilient enough to change your modality or your method to fit the preferred style of the other person. So one example, and I'll end with that, is that pre-COVID, I began to see that, a lot of learning was happening more and more online.
Right.
And that companies were less likely to spend big budgets to have me fly to California and for them to gather 25 people for me to teach a class.
Right.
They didn't want to spend the budget, and they didn't want people away from their office for the day.
Right.
And so way before COVID, I started to collaborate with someone who I also found on LinkedIn to create a virtual version of my one-day in-class seminar. So, of course, when COVID happened, everybody went into virtual.
Right.
But I was ready. Now, it's not that I was such a fortune teller that I knew that COVID was coming. But so now we are teaching the influence program by an e-learning, online learning. And so, and Elinor as well is a public speaker, but that ain't going to happen anytime soon. The people are not going to invite me to come be the luncheon speaker for a conference where people are sitting close to each other.
No,
it's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen in a couple years. So I think so we have to adapt. Have to adapt.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing. So that's part of our adaptation today is talking about influence, talking about the future. We know that from what you showed, even the UN form is showing that influence is important and the skills will be important. So we have to stay tuned to that. Okay. But unfortunately, we're coming at the end of our time again, Elaina.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for sharing your Friday with us. And,
my pleasure. I have another 19 pages.
Well, the future's long. All right. The future's long, and we'll be back talking about this again. Okay.
Love talking to you, Tom.
As well. And maybe virtually, we will be here listening or seeing or participating in one of your virtual seminars here in Brazil. You never know.
You never know. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your very astute questions. Obviously, you're an influencer, and I am delighted and flattered to be invited to be your guest today. So thank you so much.
And we're
for having
equally
me.
happy to have you with us, okay?
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
You too. I want to thank
Bye.
everybody here and all of our listeners, and you can find more about Elaina Zuker. Her name is Elaina, Elaina. Her last name, Zuker, is Zuker. You'll find her on LinkedIn, as we mentioned, and also her website, which is called EZInfluence.com. That's EZInfluence.com. I'd like to thank our audience and our sponsor, Focus MI Market Intelligence. Focus MI specializes in market research for the Brazilian agricultural market. More about them on their website, which is www.focusmi.com. Visit our website, talktobrazil.com. Find our previous shows of Talk to Brazil, which are also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and many more. Remember, when you talk to Tom, you talk to Brazil and the world. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Tom Reaoch on Talk to Brazil, the business connector to Brazil.